Hi, I'm Paul Brown. I'm Managing Director of an organisation called BoardWorks, and today we're going to talk about that doozy topic, board reporting.
Hi, welcome to Governance Bites. My name is Banicevich, and as you just heard, I get to spend some more time with Paul Brown. Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
When we were chatting about this, the concept of board reporting you introduced, but a very specific angle on this, and you used the term converting data to knowledge to wisdom and insight. And so we'll dig a little bit into that, but I want to start by asking you to define the question. What do you mean when you talk about converting data to knowledge and then to wisdom and insight?
Yeah, sure thing, Mark. And at BoardWorks, our core service is board evaluations, and often we find with our clients one of their challenges or one of their problems they face is they say when you interview directors, many often will say the board report is rubbish. So we like to flip that on its head and say, well, why is it rubbish? And it's very easy to say, well, management are giving us far too much information. The board pack is this thick. I haven't got time to read it. It's not strategic, and it tells me nothing. So we, again, would challenge the board members and say, well, that's incumbent on you as a director or as a board, not on management, because we would also say to the board, how explicit have you been in asking management what information you need of them and in what form? So coming back to your question, we really want to make sure that the board report has one function. The board report is there to help the board do its job. And the board can only do its job if it's not receiving data. It's receiving data that's been synthesised into information. It's gone further, actually, that information has then been interpreted and really put into knowledge and into wisdom in terms of helping the board make decisions about the future of that organisation.
Right, so if I can take those three terms around data, knowledge and wisdom and insight combining into one. Data, lots and lots of numbers and information. Yep. You've got an analyst that'll be working through that, producing some telling you what the data show. That's your knowledge phase, to say that we've got all these data, we've done our analysis, and we can see, for example, an increase in revenue, or we can see a reduction in the age of our average customer, those sorts of things. And then the wisdom and insight part is then, okay, well, so what?
So what? Yeah, correct. Yeah.
What are you going to do with that? Right. What are then the key elements of an effective board report? How's it structured to provide insights rather than just providing data?
Yeah, sure. So a good report should be concise and easily to digest. We've all got ever decreasing attention spans. So unfortunately, we've got to make sure the information is packaged and presented in a way that gets to the nub of the issue. So yes, avoid data, but really get into the information. You've just mentioned before, the so what. But it also should be presented in a way that it's not just so what, it's if then. So we're going further and further into the future. We see a lot of board reports are very thick, talking about what happened. It's the chief executives wish to disclose how busy they are. So board reports end up being busyness, not about the business. So we want the board report really to be working hard to help the board make decisions about the future of where the organisation needs to head. We can't change the past. There's no point reporting on hundreds of pages of what we did. We need to help that information help the board make decisions. So we really want to see a type report that is focusing on strategic matters, put in the stuff that's not important towards the back. And we see this also then filter into how the agenda is set for each board meeting. And we'll often see a board meeting start with the very procedural matters, and you'll see the energy sucked out of the meeting as we go through the apologies, the minutes, who's here, who's not. And then often we'll see in the agenda the first report up is the CEO's report, which again drags the meeting right back into operational mode. And we're saying to boards, actually, can you push the CEO report to the back and make sure the board report, even if it is a CEO report, is really focused on strategic matters and decisions.
Right. There is one person that I've interviewed in the series that I've known for a while and works in the governance space, and he has the confirmation of the previous meeting's minutes
back at the end.
Of the
We see it a lot
at the start. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a really nice approach to focus on the future. And also in terms of the length of individual board papers, we tend to have this maximum of 3 pages maximum, right? Which I've trying to write these things and having gotten better at it over the years, it comes back to that old. I love that old Blaise Pascal quote, right? That I'd have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time.
Yep.
But you got to focus on getting what are the key elements that you want to pull out, then I guess your recommendations for what the action is you want off the back of that, and give the board enough information to pull it apart.
And if there isn't a decision there, like those minutes in the previous meeting, put it towards the back of the pack in terms of it's not adding value to the meeting. So again, keep the board report really concise, really crisp. And if the board have asked management and specifically asked them what needs to go in there and what reporting in what form, that box is, we're halfway there. The other half is actually the authors of the reports themselves, management or the chief exec or company secretary. If there is a company secretary, which not all boards are fortunate to have, you have the scale, absolutely. But have they got the mandate to say to their chief executive, who they might indirectly report to, hey Mark, what you've provided is rubbish. I can't put that in the pack. So we've got to allow those company secretaries or whoever's compiling the report to have the ability to push back, often to people higher up, that are more senior to them, to say, actually, we need to get this tighter. So challenge those authors. As they're writing that report, they should be asking themselves, what do I want the board to do with this information?
Yeah, I really like the thing that you, one of the things that you said there was essentially anything that you want a decision made, front load that in the meeting, and anything that's information only, backload.
Yeah, so we're looking for...
great rule.
Yeah, and if it's a board report or the CE's report, get those strategic decision matters up front. Then talk about variance. The board have discharged you as a CE to get on with the plan.
Yes.
Just tell the board where you're off plan, or way ahead or way behind.
Yes.
BAU, no time for it. Let's just keep it focused on the future.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What are some best practices for summarising complex data into clear, concise insights for board members?
Yeah, and there are specialist consultants who can help with performance frameworks, but we really would encourage chief execs or those who are charged with preparing the report to really focus on fewer indicators, ideally leading indicators that will help the board understand what the future looks like. Again, we can't relitigate or recreate the past. That's gone. So finding those, we talk about 4 dials when we evaluate boards. We challenge directors, we ask them, Mark, if you could come up with a 1-page board report, what would the 4 dials on that board report be that would give you comfort as a board, as a director, that the business is both conforming and performing? So really trying to crisp it down to say, okay, if I could have a dashboard of just 4 dials, what would they look like? And that forces the directors into a real high-level sort of strategic mindset to then actually ask management, this is what we need to start reading and start reviewing as part of the report.
Right, and I guess that will also tie in with understanding what the key levers are in the business.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're all guilty of populating reports with bump that doesn't actually add value. So let's strip that back and say, well, what are those leading indicators? Getting back to the wisdom,
Yeah, right. What types of questions should board members be asking to get insights from their board reports?
Well, a good director should be checking in terms of, how do I know this information is to be true? And that sounds, and checking the integrity of the data or the information, and doing that in a constructive manner that's not seen to be punitive and beating the CE up. But I'm a big fan of Roger Martin, who's ex-lecturer at Rotman in Canada, whose focus really was on strategy, and actually, if you read his books about devising winning strategy, but he always had a really good question which began with, what would need to be true for, and you can fill in the blanks according to your organisation. So as a director, what would need to be true for this to be happening? So that as a director forces you to understand, okay, well, what are the conditions, what are the assumptions, what does the environment need to look like for us to actually land on that space?
Right, great, thank you. That's really helpful. How can boards move beyond data and knowledge to gain deeper wisdom that guides the long-term strategy of the business or the entity?
There's no shortcut. It comes back to understanding how the machine operates, what it's there to do, how does it, if it's a commercial entity, how does it make money? And understand those, you mentioned the word levers, understanding what those levers are for profit if it's a commercial organisation. If it's a for-purpose or non-profit, what are the levers for achieving impact? And often we tend to, if I'm talking about the for-purpose space, we tend to get comfortable looking at outputs. easy to point to things and measure things. Outcomes a bit more foggy, impact foggier still, but you've got to keep challenging yourself to keep your eye on the prize, which is impact or could be profit in the commercial space. And another good author, if you've got time to read, Anmei Chang, wrote a book called Lean Impact, built on Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. And Anmei Chang was saying, what are the conditions that you can do as a board or as a chief exec to set up innovation in the for-purpose or non-profit space? So how do you get more innovative? And what Anne was saying is absolutely obsess and fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve. Don't be seduced by the solution your team has come up with. And I'd encourage that to all board members, whether they be for-profit, for-purpose or public sector entities. Really stay in love with the problem. That's what you're there to do.
Yeah, right. That makes a lot of sense, because if you fall in love with the solution, then you've got the blinkers on and you're not looking at the other opportunities that may arise. Yeah, okay. How can governance frameworks support the effective use of data in board reporting?
When organisations are heavy on data, and thankfully we're seeing technology, AI for instance, has a great ability to collapse, condense, and summarise information, not necessarily synthesise, so you still need some human eyes looking over those. But frameworks and structures, you could look at committees that could actually do some of the heavy lifting of aggregating some of that data, so it's then presented to the wider board in a more palatable format. Doesn't mean you're off the hook as a director if you're not on that committee, but it just allows, I guess, the board to have more bandwidth on more important issues. Yeah.
One of the, I started my career really as an analyst, working through creating a lot of spreadsheets and little databases and things to analyse data and report. And one of the challenges I recall, risks really, Microsoft Excel. Mm-hmm. Everyone uses it. Some people have been trained in what it does, but very few people have been trained in how to use it well to analyse data. And so that creates a whole lot of people that are self-taught. You end up with a whole lot of spreadsheets that are chaotic, haphazard, and open to risk of error. And there's a risk that these are the sorts of models that are being used to make board decisions. What governance structures need to be in place to ensure data integrity and the credibility of the information and the insights that are being provided to the board?
You've got functions such as external auditors or even internal audit to be that sort of bellwether and making sure that processes and procedures and data has got integrity. So I'd be leaning on those. It is a challenge if you're not part of that industry to really sense check that data, what you're being fed. But again, bring in outsiders if you don't feel comfortable, learn from those outsiders, but be prepared to ask the questions. I mean, if you don't understand, seek to understand and ask the question of your team.
And challenge your assumptions and know what you're relying on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very easy to see a report with some numbers on it and think, okay, I can make a decision based on those numbers. But are those numbers actually correct or materially correct?
Well, absolutely. And I think too, you mentioned a minute ago, Mark, risk was an example that we earlier in your career. I think too, with risk, as with all data, we just tend to look at one item at a time and not realise there are interdependencies. So what would happen if this risk changed along with this risk, or they combined? So rather than just being the frailties of human nature, just looking at one thing at a micro level, how do we step back and view it at a macro level and say, okay, these things actually are interrelated?
Yeah, absolutely. One final question for you for this conversation. Could you share with us a memorable learning event from your own governance experience?
I think we touched on it before. I think we're all, and maybe I was the other side of the governance table as a chief exec, I think we're all guilty of trying to beat our chests and say how busy we've been as opposed to how effective we've been. So the learning for me is actually effectiveness is better than busyness. So really trying to distill what that information is saying, how the reporting is actually capturing that and moving away from just pure volume. So
I can see that if you've got that mindset as a CE producing the report for the board, you'll end up with much smaller board reports for a start. There's probably there may be a tendency where sometimes you're thinking, what effectiveness have I got to report? And so you fall back on the busyness. But if you've always got that mindset of, what are the challenging questions that I really need to take to the board, where I need help making decisions, apart from that, I just need a short report to give the board the confidence that I'm on track to do what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, and come back to that point, the board report is there to help the board do its work. How does it fit in with their work plan, and how does it fit in with the future of the organisation?
Not for the CEO to report how busy they've been.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, great. Paul, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Great conversation. Hopefully we'll catch up again soon and see you next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.